Welcome to Jason Sports Detroit Lions News Podcast on the Jason Sports YouTube channel. Find it wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll be very entertained. But let's go through the game preview. I do this every week. I want to do it again. This is a huge matchup in the NFL. It's the last game of the NFL season, and they saved the best for last. So when you think about these two teams, obviously you think about there's two losses for each team. Obviously, you think that the team that wins this is going to get the NFC home field advantage, and I think both teams want that home field advantage because the Vikings have a really good home field advantage. The Lions have a good home field advantage, and they're going to be fighting to the death. And obviously, when you think about the Vikings and if you're picking the Vikings to win, you're thinking the Vikings are going to win because the Detroit Lions defense is injured. They haven't been as good as of late. And if you're going to pick the Lions, you're going to say, well, because the Lions offense is so good, it's going to be incredible. And they could really exploit the defense of Brian Flores because he likes to blitz, and Jared Goff and Jameer Gibbs. And that offense has done pretty good against the Minnesota Vikings. But if you're just as an observer and you're trying to figure out, where am I going to go with this game? What am I kind of feeling? I got you. We're going to go through it, and we're going to go through some of the statistics, not only on with the slides, but we got some screen shares. I'm going to show you all of that right now. But let's start with it is. Um, Detroit's a 2.5 point favorite. The over under is 56.5. And when you look at the spread in total, it's 56.5. The money line is plus 130 for the Vikings and minus 154 for the Detroit Lions. And look, when we talk about the Detroit Lions and when we talk about the Minnesota Vikings, let's start with where it is. These two teams have great head coaches. Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, two great head coaches. They have great coordinators. I mean, I don't know who the offensive coordinator really is because Kevin O'Connell calls the plays for the Minnesota Vikings, but Brian Flores is the great defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, and he sure should get some job opportunities in this next cycle. And then you look at Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. Those guys have been really great defensive coordinators. As in Aaron Glenn's case, look what he's been doing with that defense that's so badly injured. They're staying afloat. They're doing enough to win. You look at Ben Johnson, and there's no one that needs to say anything about Ben Johnson. He has one of the best offenses in the league. Obviously, the talent is right there, but he does a good job at doing, you know, showing which way they're going to go. He uses a lot of motions. It's a well orchestrated offense, and he does a good job at attacking opposing defenses in their weakness. So let's start with the Vikings offense. The Vikings offense total yards 371. They're a top 10 unit in nearly every category except rushing, where they're 108.4, which is 19th in the NFL. And when you think about this, they're fifth in the Pro Football Focus offensive team ranking. So when you think about the Vikings offense, you think about what they're able to do and what are they not able to do. So let's give you an advantage for the Vikings. The Vikings are going to have an advantage here at deep passing. The Lions defense versus Vikings offense, the advantage it clearly goes to the Vikings. The Vikings rank first overall in deep passing. The Detroit Lions rank 14th in deep passing. But if you look at some of the things that Detroit does good, goes against the Minnesota Vikings. The Detroit Lions are third in intermediate passing, 15th for the Minnesota Vikings intermediate passing for their offense. Passing versus the blitz, the Detroit Lions are number one. The Minnesota Vikings are number six, so there's not much of a difference there. Passing versus no blitz, the Detroit Lions are number 21, eighth for the Minnesota Vikings, so the advantage goes to the Vikings. Passing versus play action, Detroit is number one in the NFL. The Minnesota Vikings are seven, so you got two top 10 units. And then you look at some of the little ones. Passing versus no play action, 9 for the Vikings offense, 13 for the Lions defense. Passing versus no pressure, third for the Vikings, seventh for the Lions defense. Long passing, which is the same thing, ninth. Both teams are ranked ninth overall. And quick passing, both teams are ranked fourth overall. Passing versus pressure, the Vikings are ranked 12th, and so are the Detroit Lions defense, and ninth for short passing, ninth, eighth, and then overall passing efficiency, the Vikings offense ranks sixth. The Detroit Lions defense ranks seventh. So, right, you're just kind of seeing what I'm trying to throw at you. This is such a tightly contested battle. There's no really statistic that jumps off off the page at you. You're not going, okay, We know that Detroit's defense hasn't been good, but when you look at the statistics and you look at how these teams are closely mirrored towards each other, it's going to come down to a few plays. That's what it really comes down to. So there's an interesting stat with Sam Darnold. I want to put this up here. When he's blitzed, he has thrown no interceptions. When he's not blitzed, he's thrown 12 interceptions. Also, the most interesting thing about Sam Darnold, as good as he's played this year, he's had 22 turnover worthy throws, turnover worthy passes. That's third in the NFL. That's behind Kirk Cousins. That's behind Baker Mayfield. And is it saying that he's going to turn over the ball against the Minnesota Vikings? Absolutely not. What I will say, though, is if he does those turnover worthy passes against Kirby Joseph or Brian Branch, one of the two, they will pick it off. And that could be the defining factor in this game. You got to look at it from this perspective, okay? If you're a Vikings fan, you're watching this, the biggest thing is not turn over the ball. I think both teams, there's two things that really jump off the page at you. You can't turn over the ball and you have to convert in points. There's no room for, kicking field goals. It cost the Minnesota Vikings in the first game. They kicked 3 field goals. The Detroit Lions kicked 1, and Detroit won it by 2 points. That's how closely mirrored these teams are. And when you look at the Lions defense, like they haven't been as great as most people think. But statistically, they're still damn good defense. And if you look at some of the efficiency type things, they're still in the top like 15. So it's a very interesting dynamic with the Detroit Lions defense and the Minnesota Vikings offense. Obviously, the Vikings offense is going to jump off at you. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, the emergence of Jalen Naylor. If I'm a Michigan State fan, I watched Jalen Naylor at Michigan State. I didn't think he would. I thought he would be pretty good in the pros. He's a pretty reliable receiver, and he's showing out for the Minnesota Vikings. So that's very impressive right there. Let's go to the Vikings defense, and let's see what the Vikings defense is, really going to do. So you look at the Vikings defense, they're top 10 in nearly every category except rushing yards. They are 19th in the NFL. Oh, this is the offense. My bad. Defense. I got that wrong. They are 10th in the Pro Football Focus rankings, 18th in total yards, 28th in passing yards, second in rushing yards. They defend the rush pretty good. Fourth in points, fourth in third down percentage, 35.3. And when you talk about the defense of the Vikings, let's just go through the statistics right here. We'll go through the statistics. Long passing, the Detroit Lions rank number 1. The Vikings rank number 11. That's a clear advantage for the Detroit Lions. Passing versus play action, Detroit ranks number 1. The Vikings rank number 17. Deep passing, the Detroit Lions rank number 4. The Vikings rank number 20. Passing versus pressure, the Detroit Lions rank number 3. The Vikings rank number 13. Quick passing, the Detroit Lions rank number 5. The Vikings rank number 1 in quick passing. Passing versus no blitz, the Detroit Lions rank number 1. The Vikings rank number 6. Passing versus no pressure, the Lions they rank number 1, and the Vikings rank number 3. Overall passing efficiency, the Lions rank number 2. The Vikings rank number 5. Passing versus blitz, the Detroit Lions rank number 2. The Vikings rank number 7. We're going down the line. You're seeing that there's really no drop off in these two teams. And look, the rushing statistics clearly favor the Minnesota Vikings. You look at rushing in the red zone. Detroit is number 8 on offense. The Vikings are number 27. Rushing under center, the Vikings are the best in the league at defending the run. When you're under center, running over outside the tackles, the Vikings are number 2. They're number 1 in overall rushing efficiency. Rushing versus stacked box, the Detroit Lions are number 19, and the Vikings are number 5. So you're starting to see kind of a dilemma. If we go back to the Vikings offense, their rush offense in terms of efficiency, rushing the red zone, rushing under center, rushing in the outside tackles, rushing versus stacked box, overall rushing efficiency, it's not good. So that could be a key advantage for the Detroit Lions right there. But let's get back to the past and let's talk about what the Detroit Lions could do against the Minnesota Vikings. That could be the decipher. So let's talk about deep passing for the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions rank number 4 in the NFL in deep passing. The Minnesota Vikings rank number 20th defensively in deep passing. The advantage goes to the Detroit Lions, obviously. But when you think about Jared Goff, And you think about what has done against Brian Flores. He's 75 for 97, 77.3 completion percentage, 857 yards, 8.8 yards per attempt, 5 TDs in the air, one on the ground. Who knew Jared Goff would have one on the ground against Brian Flores? Zero interceptions, a passer rating of 120, 44 passing first downs, 14.67 a game, and a 57.3 success rate. There's a lot to digest there. But when we talk about Jared Goff against Brian Flores, we got to talk about the blitz, because when the blitz happens, Jared Goff is at his best. The Minnesota Vikings are going to blitz 30% clip, maybe 40, maybe 50. They might blitz the hell out of Goff. But Goff is one of the best quarterbacks against the blitz in the NFL. Look at his completion percentage, 69.7, third in the NFL. 1,300 yards, that's sixth in the NFL. 9 yards per attempt, that's fourth in the NFL. 13 touchdowns, tied for fourth in the NFL. 8 sacks, fifth lowest in the NFL. Those are all statistics that lean towards the Detroit Lions in terms of the way that Jared Goff is against Brian Flores, is against the blitz, and we know the Minnesota Vikings like the blitz. Now, if the Minnesota Vikings want to defend the pass with no blitz, that goes again. It goes and it helps Detroit. Passing versus the no blitz, Detroit is number one. Passing versus no pressure, Detroit is number one. These are situations where the statistics bear it out. This is a tough offensive stop for the Detroit Lions, and they said they have scored 30 a game with Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator again as a Minnesota Vikings. So you're looking at it and you're going, God, there's not much that deciphers these two teams. No, there's not. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a drag out, and if you have blood pressure pills, I'm going to tell you to take them for this game. I don't care if you're a Vikings fan or a Lions fan. Take those damn blood pressure pills. You are going to need it. Now, we know that the Vikings defense has been really good against the rush, but there's one guy that's had a really good, um, he's been really good against Brian Flores and the Minnesota Vikings, and that is Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs against this has been the 5-game span of the Vikings defense Vikings run defense has ranked over the 5-game span, the last 5 games, 15th in EPA, 23rd in success rate, 16th in yards per carry, 4.5, and 17th in DVOA. That's from Jeremy Reisman of Pride of Detroit. Great stat by Jeremy Reisman. He had a great preview. I explore you to read it, obviously, if you're a Lions fan. It's a pretty good preview throughout. But Gibbs versus Minnesota, 3 games, 43 carries, 226 yards, 75.3 yards per game. And a lot of those games, he was splitting carries with Dave Montgomery. He has 5 touchdowns in 3 games against the Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores. So we go through this whole thing. We go through everything. We go through the rushing, the passing, both the offense and the defense. Can you give me some statistics that will make me kind of like, oh, watch out for these guys? Jonathan Grenard and Ivan Pace have generated 5 pressures and 1 sack across 21 pass rushes. That's 23.8 pressure rate in week 7 against Detroit. And they had a sack with going against Taylor Decker, obviously. But you look at these two quarterbacks, they're really good. Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, they're playing out of their mind. You look at the wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson. These are 2 of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams, they're both coming on. They're both playing exceptionally well. The tight ends, TJ Hawkinson and Sam Laporta. You look at the running game, Aaron Jones has always been good, but Jahmyr Gibbs has been just outstanding, especially since Dave Montgomery's been out. Obviously, the defense is skewed because Detroit's having a lot of defensive injuries, but when you look at the back end of the Detroit Lions, Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch, those are guys that are literally making an impact day in and day out. And look, the Vikings have Ivan Pace. They have Jonathan Grenard. Andrew Van Ginkel is a damn good player. If I'm the Detroit Lions and if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, there's going to be a couple of things that sway this game. And it's going to go back to the first matchup. In the first matchup, Kevin O'Connell settled for 3 field goals. Now, Will Reichert has had a little bit of a hiccup in his kicking, but I think he's a damn good kicker. I think he'll make his kicks. But when you settle for 3 field goals and Detroit Lions settle for 1, That one that you settled for that the Lions didn't was pretty much the definitive factor in the Detroit Lions winning against the Minnesota Vikings a week in the first matchup. So if I'm Kevin O'Connell, I gotta think that I'm going up against a team in Detroit that is at home. They're gonna be comfortable. They're gonna go for it on fourth down a lot. They are gonna go for on fourth down when they see the fit. And the team that makes the least mistakes, the coaching staff that makes the least mistakes is gonna win this game. Basically what it comes down to. You look at the Lions, if Dan Campbell goes for it, he misses on 2 of them, that could be the definitive factor of the game. If Brian Flores decides to blitz Jared Goff at an enormous rate, he will feel Jared Goff beat him. It's all how it has to go. So this is going to be an interesting matchup from the Detroit Lions perspective. It's going to be an interesting matchup from the Minnesota Vikings perspective. We're going to talk about it all throughout. Obviously, if you are in the comments, please comment below what you think is going to happen in this game. Uh, if you're not a Lions fan or a Vikings fan, let me know what you think. And does the stats kind of sway your mind in terms of which way you're going to go? I think this is going to be a tough game. I think it's going to be physical. I do think Detroit will edge Minnesota out. I'm just giving them because of the home field advantage, but this game could go either way. And these are two tough teams, two great head coaches. These are two of the most well coached teams in the NFL. I can tell you that right now. And this is going to be a fun game. But if you have blood pressure pills or you're a scaredy cat, I suggest taking your blood pressure pills, or if you're a scaredy cat, I suggest some alcohol. We will talk about the post game after the game. But this is going to be a really good game. And I think Detroit has the edges in terms of the offense, but it's gonna be a drag out. And I think it's gonna be a high scoring game. Obviously, the over under is 56.5. I think that could be right on par. I think you could be seeing, 27-31 or 31-34. God forbid you get a 42-38 game. I mean, that's just what I think is going to happen. But I think both these defenses can be had. I think what it's going to come down to is, does the turnover worthy passes that Sam Darnold throws, do they come back to haunt him? Does the Detroit Lions defense come back to haunt them? These are all things that could play a role in this win or lose for either team, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. We'll see you guys on the pregame for the Detroit Lions news podcast Sunday at like 1 o'clock, and then we'll be here on JC Sports after the game talking about the post game, no matter win, lose, or draw. Which, if it's a draw, this sucks. But we'll talk about it on the Detroit Lions News podcast and JC Sports YouTube page. Please subscribe, click, and follow below, and we will talk about the Detroit Lions all throughout the rest of the next 2 days. So, and also follow Detroit Lions News podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and follow me at Detroit Joe Chap on X. We will see you in the next video as we talk more Detroit Lions football here on the JC Sports YouTube page.